Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, depending on where you are. This is a test stream for the first episode of the fifth column. It's a bit impromptu, and I apologize if there are any difficulties later on as I go through this. Now, what is the purpose of this stream? Well, to be honest, I never considered myself to be much of a person that liked to put myself online, but I feel like the way things are going as of late have really started to scare me at what pace they are sort of moving at. I'm not sure how aware people are of Agenda 2030, but essentially it is it has the tagline, "You will own nothing and you will be happy." Now, at first I thought, I know they have all these grand ideas, and I don't think that they will be able to go through with it. But seeing Indonesia at the moment and what it is going through really has made me question the ability for people to resist this, as well as question how much governments really don't care, regardless of the pushback that is received. So currently in Indonesia, let me just break down what exactly is going on. We've had a new government take over, I believe, since either late last year. I believe it was late last year. And since then, a bunch of regulations that were set to come through, regardless of who the president was, have started to come through. And I believe a lot of them have been pushed through due to the large amount of debt that Indonesia has incurred over the years. Nothing new in that regard. It's just sort of ticked up over the course of maybe 5 or 6 presidencies. I'm not sure exactly. And now things are really coming to a head. And I think it's an important case study to look at, especially for people in America who have a very high debt, and as well as, a bunch of other countries all around the world. We sort of allow politicians to sort of borrow and continue to borrow, whether it be for infrastructure projects and such. Indonesia in particular is well-known. I'm sorry, be right back. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Actually, somebody came in. So where was I? Yes, so debt has sort of been increasing all around the world, and we are sort of under the illusion that, things will be all right. They can't force us to pay it. They're just going to have to figure things out. But what is being seen in Indonesia at the moment is that you do have to pay that back. And the government will go to any length to make sure that that happens. And what is really shocking is how initially the idea of democracy, obviously, is that, the people elect a leader, that leader represents them. Now, whether or not that is really what happens or not is besides the point. It's just sort of the concept that is living in people's mind. But what I'm seeing more and more is, with the debt being so high, you're finding that the politicians are actually representing the institution that they borrow from to ensure that they manage their people to accept that they have to pay back this loan. So it's almost like they're working on behalf of the international banks at this stage. And it's really shocking. So I'm going to play this video This is from the 25th of August, and this is the Indonesian people pretty much have had it, and they're hitting the streets. Now, there's a multitude of reasons as to why they hit the streets. The big main one that they're talking about here, and is the purpose of this demonstration, is essentially to break up the parliament and have re-elections for every member. So in Indonesia, they have the MPR and the DPR, and the MPR is pretty much in charge of guarding the constitution, and the DPR is pretty much the parliament, which is, elected officials. And what has happened is these elected officials, because they know the debt is out of control now, they have decided to essentially just vote themselves a bunch of benefits. And one of the benefits is $1,200 a month for rice. Also, they don't pay any tax. So any tax that they pay gets covered by the government. Also, they recently apparently they didn't like the housing that was provided by the government. So they each have decided to not have housing from the government and instead be provided $5,000 a month from the government. $5,000 Australian, by the way, in order to cover those costs. This brings their total wage that they receive to about, these numbers, who knows which one's correct, but essentially the bottom floor would be about $10,000, up to about $20,000 Australian. Keep in mind, in Indonesia, the minimum wage is about $300 a month. So the average citizen is receiving about $300 to $400 to $500 a month. Meanwhile, the politicians have voted for themselves to receive $10,000 to $20,000 a month, and they don't pay any tax. They have everything covered. So this is essentially a result of those regulations or those benefits being pushed through Parliament. People have had it. So I'm just going to play this video just to begin with. I'll just turn it down a little bit. Things did get a bit violent at some points. And the police were pretty much ready to meet the protesters from the get-go. They mobilized quite quickly, pushed them back immediately before there was any violence. To be honest, it wasn't really as violent as, some of the protests that may have happened in the past. I would say the most violent thing that happened maybe was the protesters went after a car of a parliament member and smashed it up. Aside from that, I wouldn't say it was out of control. Now, after this day, apparently the latest news is that they will be hitting the streets again on the 28th of this month. This time, not just students, but also factory workers and such. So it's planned to be a bigger event. We'll have to see. The interesting thing about this, as I mentioned, this protest was in particular to do with the benefits that were voted on for the parliament members, and that seems to be the primary issue here. However, this is just a small thing that's occurred. Since the beginning of the year, it's been issue after issue, just bombarded. There's been a number of corruption cases that went on. A number of them have been criticized for being mishandled, in the sense where the person that's caught isn't the primary person who was in charge of the corruption, but just some small players. And so those small players have been criminalized and attacked, thrown in jail. And the primary person who engaged in the corruption has actually been let free. There have also been cases where the person who is found guilty, all of a sudden the president will come in, swoop in, and give them amnesty. So it's a strange situation where it's almost like theater, where the corruption trial is sort of put on TV. It's a big deal. Everybody goes, why is it so unfair that this person goes to jail? And at the end, they find him guilty. They throw him in jail. And then the president swoops in and says, you know what? I'm going to give you amnesty. You're free. It's happened, I believe twice this year. Don't quote me on that. Now, as you can see here, police were really well prepared for it. Before things got violent, I already noticed the police were shooting tear gas into the crowd. So, not to say that it's bad to be prepared on the police's side, but it certainly seems that there's so many issues in the country. They're well aware that what they are doing is causing a lot of the citizenry to be to get quite angry. To top it all off, there's just no jobs at the moment. There's a lot of the population that is struggling to find work. Funnily enough, ChatGPT is Indonesia is one of the countries that has accepted AI and ChatGPT within its work environment. More so than others, it's integrated it in, which is strange. It's really interesting to hear that statistic. But yeah, you're seeing a lot of Indonesians without work, and I think this is also contributing to it. Taxes have gone up, not just gone up, but new taxes have been added. The Minister of Finance in Indonesia, Sri Mulyani, she has been in that position right now. She's currently in her third term, so by the end of this term, she would have been there for 15 years, which is more than a president's allowed to be elected for, which is maximum of 2 terms. And what her stated goal from the very beginning was to widen the tax base. And you can see, like, Indonesia's never been a country that has had a widened tax base. It's always been the case where tax has mainly been covered by the elite and the corporations. So it has been a slow, gradual change over the last 10 years to widen that and make average citizens pay a lot more of their fair share. You can imagine, like street food sellers, they're starting to get hit with taxes, and just the people that are barely making ends meet having to pay taxes now. Another thing that, in my opinion, is even bigger of a problem than, let's say, the increased benefits that are being awarded to these politicians is the increase in land tax. For me, I feel like this is the ticking time bomb, and this is the reason for this video today. So it's the case that everywhere around the world currently, it is becoming more and more of a struggle to obtain your own home, whether it is in Canada, whether it is in Australia, whether it is in the US. And a lot of the time, what is blamed is immigration. What I am here to tell you guys, and this is what the importance of this stream, is it really isn't the case that it's because of immigration. That is what it is meant to look like. But honestly, based on the case study of Indonesia, I mean, Indonesia doesn't have that many migrants at all. And it's just the case that the method is different, but the goal is the same. And so if you have in Agenda 2030, the goal, the stated goal of you will own nothing and you will be happy, they will aim to make that happen regardless. And what they're trying to do is to find an excuse that is viable enough, that will keep people divided enough so that they can go ahead with their plan. And so in Western countries, they use immigration and they say, there's not enough houses. In Australia, I know it to be the case that it's a lot to do with government regulation on why there's not enough houses. And certainly public-private partnership between the construction companies and the government to ensure that housing prices stay up. And in order for that to happen, you have to have demand always be high and supply always be low. In Indonesia, how they have endeavored to make sure that you own nothing and you're quote-unquote happy is to raise land taxes. And this is the interesting thing. So instead of lowering the amount of benefits that they're giving their politicians, they've decided to raise that. So obviously, it's not a question of, are they really trying to tighten the belt buckle? It's really a case of, okay, well, we know we have to take people's land. We know that we have a loan. Let's use the loan as an excuse, and we'll raise taxes in order to pay the loan that we owe. But essentially, they're not willing to forego the politicians' benefits. That is going to go up. But we want the people to lose their land, and we'll use the excuse of we have to pay back these loans. And so the first time these protests started was in this area called Pati. And the reason why is because in this area, they were saying that they're going to raise taxes by 200%. 200% is a lot, by the way. But you actually had other areas come in after that and say, you know what, we're going to raise our taxes by 1,600%. And you have areas such as Bali where they're saying that they're going to be raising their land tax by 3,400%. Now, just for those that aren't very good at math, that's 34 times. And that's not within, oh, we have a plan to raise it by 3,400% over the next 10 years. No. 3,400% increase within 1 year. So, just an example, there was an example of a man that, not in Bali, was paying his land taxes in Pati. Now, they said that that was supposed to be an increase of 200%. But actually what happened was his bill went from 40 million, which is approximately 4,000 Australian dollars for last year's land tax, and for this year's land tax. And for next year, he had to pay $100,000 plus. Now, just think about that. So you had to pay $4,000 for land tax 1 year, and then the following year you had to pay $96,000 more. Now, just think about that for a second. Is that acceptable to anybody? You own a house and then you are charged tax on it, not for any transaction. It's land tax, right? So you have to pay it on a yearly basis, and it is increased more than tenfold, more than 20-fold. How do you budget for that? Has your wage increased by that much? We know the answer to that. The answer is no. At most, your wage might go up maybe, I don't know, they'll say it'll go up with inflation maybe 2%, maybe 3%, maybe 5%, absolute max. And then here, your expenses have been cranked up if you're a landowner or a homeowner. So it truly is something to behold, to see the fact that the government doesn't really think twice about this. They're just raising the taxes without even blinking. I'm just gonna see if I can find something that will show you. It is so hard to find information on all of this. So the way the government has been working lately is the news sort of comes out through, journalists. It comes out on social media. Social media is a big source of the news over here. And okay, so it seems like they are definitely thinking about So it definitely seems like the protests on the 25th have had an impact, because it seems like they are rethinking things slightly. But to be honest, I think the seed has been planted. As much as people may believe that it's too high, I think the government will definitely increase the taxes now that people have sort of accepted that it can go to such an extreme degree. So yeah. So I suppose the big question becomes, what is the purpose of all of this? And there has been news that obviously, with most people in the villages owning land that has been passed down by generation to generation, such an increase would make it pretty much impossible for them to pay. And so what is the solution to that? And this is the scary thing. Apparently, there may be a regulation from the government to allow these homeowners and landowners to borrow money from the bank in order to pay their taxes back. It's insane, because a lot of these people out in the village, the amount of tax that they will be charged will be more than the worth of the land. And this is an interesting thing about Indonesia. How it works is the government has a land tax rate, and that's currently what is being discussed to be increased. Then they have something called an NJOP, which is essentially the government over here decides what suburbs have a price of what. So essentially they'll give a square meterage, like 1 square meter in this suburb is going to be this price. Usually it has no basis within the market. Sometimes the market is less, sometimes the market is more. Usually the market is higher, right? So the understanding is that, okay, we're going to have a base price of what we think that the land value is. We'll charge taxes on that. But if there is a decrease in spending power and the price of houses goes down, there's no decrease on the government's end. There is no there is no relation to the market. They choose a price of what they set a square meterage at, and then they set the tax rate. Now the tax rate's about to shoot up, and a lot of people are complaining because the square meterage rate is also going to be raised. The government right now is negotiating, saying, "Oh no, we're not going to touch the the price that we've set it at, called the NJOP. We're not going to touch the NJOP price, so don't worry about that. We're going to just raise the land tax." Now the thing is, the land tax, as I just mentioned, they're increasing it minimum by 100 to 200%. That's the minimum. So at minimum, you're paying double, right? At maximum, there is no maximum. There's been discussions of 34 times. There's been discussions of 36 times. There's been discussions of 20 times. So a lot of the people that are complaining, they're met with, "Oh, well, don't worry, we're not going to raise the NJOP." Okay, but then the thing is, if you're paying 34 times the tax rate you were paying last year, and that's on a yearly basis, and then next year they decide to raise the NJOP, well, then you're just paying, like, they're just coming up with different excuses to raise the amount that you have to pay every single year. And so it's definitely something that is scary to think about. People are going to be priced essentially out of their properties. And once they lose their properties, I don't think there's going to be any way to get back. I think it's going to be difficult to sell your property now, because anybody who wishes to buy your property has to then take on this tax burden. So, to be honest, I think that the government is creating a major, major problem for its own people, for investment. Just overall, I do not see Indonesia being able to improve economically with such regulations being put in place. And so I think this is a warning to all the other countries that have insane amounts of debt. It is only a matter of time before your governments start pushing similar regulations that are nonsensical. And if you think that, oh, well, then we'll just rise up, I'm pretty sure that the Indonesian people are more violent than the Australian people. And when they hit the streets, they probably, elicit a lot more fear within the police force. And yet there hasn't really been any acknowledgement on the government's part that they are willing to listen to the people and change. And so what we have here is they are going to implement the agenda full force. They are not going to be listening to the people or stop. And even if they did, at what stage will it actually help when everybody's lost already all their land? It's scary times. Scary times. We have different laws that are coming up in Australia as well, which show this sort of nonsensical approach to achieving Agenda 2030. In particular, there's a bedroom tax being discussed where if you use 2 bedrooms and you have an extra bedroom, well, then you're going to get taxed on that. You also have the unrealized gains tax, which is coming out in Victoria. And the reason why Victoria is implementing it first is because during COVID, Victoria was the one that provided the most benefits to the people. They borrowed a lot of money, and so now they have to pay it back. And so they are the first to come up with this idea of unrealized gains. And essentially what unrealized gains is that if the value of my home or the value of my asset increases over the year, regardless of if I have sold it or not, whether there was a transaction or not, it is assumed that that value was enjoyed by me, and thus I will be taxed on it. So if my house goes up by $500,000, I haven't sold the house, I haven't received $500,000, but yet I will be charged as though I had received $500,000. So I will be taxed on it, which is insane. A lot of things are really getting to that nonsensical level. And it's scary to me because I am seeing the rise of a lot of people in Australia in particular and the West overall, where you have a bunch of, they like to call them white supremacists. They like to call them far-right activists. I think it's not helpful to apply labels like that. I think ultimately everybody is going to fall into a movement which they believe is representing their best interests. In this particular case, you know, the old local white population of Australia feel like their needs aren't being met by the current government because they're opening the floodgates to immigration. But for me, I don't really see as stopping immigration as the primary solution. Should immigration be reduced? Yes, I agree. But I think everybody is in their microcosm. You have the Australians thinking about Australia. You have the Indonesians thinking about Indonesia. But the implementation of this agenda is global. And it's implemented by people that think globally. So it's not going to be solved by local solutions. Let me give you an example. What is the cause of immigration all around the world, right? It's well and good to say we don't want immigration. But when you have essentially Western militaries going around the world and destabilizing countries, those countries are then not places that people can earn and make a living and provide for their families. And so because of that, part of the whole deal of America going in there and destroying a nation is to, oh, okay, well, we're going to help you out. We're going to allow you guys to immigrate, right? And so they take these people in from the country, and these people then flood the West. Why? Simple. Economics. So the fact that you want immigration to stop, but at the same time, something is also not done about supporting of endless wars that caused the immigration problem in the first place, you're never going to get to a solution. And then the white people that find themselves being called far-right activists are simply looking out for themselves, but they do not want to be inclusive in the way that they see the problem, and instead view it as I'm versus immigrants. And this is obviously very helpful for the government, right? Because the government doesn't feel like they need to change then, because then they can just easily turn the immigrants against you, and you know what? Then you have, division. So it's something. So I believe that the only solution to everything is to look at things holistically, understand that we need to come together, understand that essentially the solution for everything, whether it be in Indonesia, whether it be in Australia, is to have a government that actually represents the people. Now, how are you going to get there? I personally don't believe that it's going to be through elections, especially in Indonesia. Just as an example, they passed something in parliament 8 years ago. I'm not sure if it's still the case, but it certainly is the case that political parties are so entrenched that it's impossible to change. But you pretty much have to, in order to become a president, you have to have at least a big portion of the House to support you. So it's not really like the case that somebody can just come and try to run. Same as America, right? You have the two main parties. That's pretty much it. In Australia, it's a little bit more of a fair go. I'll give it that. It's a better system in that sense. But I mean, ultimately, you'll find yourself in parliament. You can't really do anything anyways, right? Because you need the support of all the political parties that have been entrenched in there, and they can sort of help you get things moving, right? Because the system is already set in that way, it's going to be impossible for, in my opinion, this is my opinion, right? It's going to be impossible for any one person to come and change things. And so for me, it becomes the case where it's probably not likely with the current system of any nation to be able to change it from within. It almost has to be the case that a completely new system has to be brought in, right? And this hasn't happened in a long time, right? This current system that we have right now, nations, the Westphalian Treaty, everybody coming together at the UN and coming up with regulations together, and these laws that are just sort of stacked on top of each other instead of being like repealed and cleaned up. It's already at the point where, we haven't really had a new system in a while, and it's just all on top of each other, right? And I really think that, unfortunately, a new system has to be created, and it's only in that way that the people will be represented. There are big forces that will not allow that to happen. So it is an uphill battle for sure. But I think the first step is, this is the reason why I'm streaming today, is the first step is people that have been quiet for so long, seeing the craziness go on. I think it's time that we start engaging. And I think it needs to be the case that that it's not only the extreme voices are heard, but the average Joe, sort of middle, silent majority, that's what they call them. The silent majority voices need to be heard. It's not the case that people can just be quiet any longer. It needs to be the case that everybody starts talking about things. We need to find common ground. There's nothing wrong with not wanting immigrants to come and replace you, especially in a democracy. If you think about that, if you have 100% of the current population and you have a government that's importing 10, 20, 30% additional people, it's only a matter of time if they can make sure that the people they're importing will always vote for their policies, which is an easy thing to do in politics because you just need to give those people what they want, and they will always make sure to vote for you, essentially, because the benefits. It's not really about you're a good person, you're a good leader, but it's more so they don't want to give up on those benefits. Those benefits they've come to rely on. And as long as you can do that, you can pretty much dominate politics forever. So they've figured that out, right? There's a number of ways that different countries go about it, but in particular, the West, that's what they're doing. And so for me, like, it's funny. This is just a joke. The sure way of ending immigration almost immediately, it would be if you could get the people that were migrating over to have this perspective on politics where it's almost like they're anti-government, or they're anarchist, or they're definitely not for the major parties, right? Like if you were importing a bunch of people, you were getting opening the floodgates to immigration, but every single person that was coming through, in Australia, for example, wasn't Labor or Liberal, wasn't a Greens voter. Instead, they were voting on fringe parties, right? Every single one of them. Immigration would stop tomorrow. And so it's almost self-defeating that the far-right activists want to alienate immigrants. Because actually, if you were somehow to be able to convince them to move over to your side, you would find that the government would very, very quickly curb immigration. Because they wouldn't want to be importing people that are making their political positions weaker in the future. And so that's why, for me, the ultimate solution to everything that's going on around the world is a coming together. Every nation has to figure out ways to do that themselves. But I think it is how are people united in the first place? For America, let's talk about America. In the case of America, it was the Constitution. The Constitution was the unifying factor that made people escape from Europe and go, okay, the reason why I'm American is because I believe in the Constitution. You don't have that now. You have the whites for the whites, you have the blacks for the blacks, you have the Asians for the Asians, and then they each have their own sort of, political situation where they're each being pandered to by different parties in different ways, right? And it's in a divisive way, like, oh, we're going to give reparations for the black people, so you should vote for us. We're going to open the floodgates for immigration so more Indians can come over. So then the Indians, are supporting particular groups. But in reality, what needs to happen is a coming together where, I don't care what your race is, as long as we can agree on these set of values. And nobody is really doing that. Everybody is sort of doing what the government wants, which is engaging in that sort of divisive behavior. Oh, well, you know what? I hate immigration, so I hate immigrants. I don't want them around. But then it's sort of like, well, those immigrants that have come and have now become a part of your country, it stands to be the case that, of course, they want the best for themselves in a selfish way, just like you do. They would want the best for anybody that holds a passport of that nation. So if you all could sort of agree that what we want is the best for anybody who's a passport holder of this nation, and what do we stand by? These are the values that we stand by. If you can come to an agreement with all of that, that is powerful. That is what will be the way that we can defeat this. Why? Because the people that are running the show, the people that are pushing for this agenda, they are all from different backgrounds. They are not allowing that division to get in between them. But what is uniting them? The agenda. They believe to the fullest extent of their hearts that this agenda needs to be pushed through and will be the thing that benefits mankind as a whole. Now, what needs to happen is, on the opposite end, a set of values needs to be created that everybody can agree to. Everybody who has common sense can agree that we want our rights to be looked after. We don't care about what the other person wants to do, as long as it doesn't impact us. And I think that that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to tolerance. What we have right now is, in America, let's discuss America again as the example. You have the Republicans not liking the fact that Democrats are limiting free speech. For example, oh, this is horrible. This is, my First Amendment rights are being trampled on, blah, 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 blah. And then after that, the Democrats are done with the presidential seat. They've been brought down. The Republicans turn now. Donald Trump comes up and then he goes, you know what? We are going to make it a rule where if you burn the American flag, now you're going to go to jail. Now, it's pretty much, there's been previous court cases in America where burning any flag was seen as your First Amendment rights. You can burn whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. You can do whatever you want as long as you're not impeding on somebody else's rights. And it's now the case that Trump supporters are supporting this. They're supporting the reduction of free speech because it's being given a nationalistic flavor. And so this is the thing. Everybody approaches politics in the completely incorrect way, which is from an emotional stance. It doesn't matter what you feel, because ultimately what you feel is for today. But that regulation is not for today. That regulation is forever. So if that regulation is forever, you can see how that will be precedent for other things to be applied in the exact same way. So, okay, now you can't burn flags. You can't burn the American flag. Okay, how about we make it now we just expand that. You can't burn this country's flag. You can't burn that country's flag. You can't burn all flags now. Okay, that was flags. Let's move on to books. You can't burn this book. You can't burn that book. Okay, let's move on to something else. It just becomes a matter of time before everything just starts to encroach onto your rights more and more. And so my position is always try to not approach things from an emotional standpoint, because we're all guilty of making the wrong decisions when we are emotional. And I think what we all need to learn is that you need to approach things with a clear head, especially when it's the government. And the thing that we need to understand is they're not approaching things from an emotional standpoint. This is their job. So when did you go to work and then you approach things emotionally? This is how these politicians are. They go to work. These regulations are work. And so they know the impacts of it. They have so many different, NGOs involved in one piece of legislation. They know the impact that they're after. And usually, if you want to guarantee, it's not usually emotional, but it's usually the cause of public-private partnership that they push these kinds of things through. Okay? Now, I'm not sure what the public-private partnership is in this particular case. I'm not saying that it is for sure in that particular case. But I'm saying most legislation that is pushed through, most allocations of budget are all usually to do with public and private partnerships. So yeah, I believe that will be it for the stream today. Sorry if it was quite short. Sorry if there was only one video. I was just mainly hoping to get a few points across. I think it's very important. In the world of today, where everybody's sort of focused on their own nation, that we see that we're all actually connected, because chaos is being sown throughout the world right now. And I think every nation is being attacked by their own government almost, keeping us all busy, keeping us from uniting. We each are being thrown so many curveballs since the beginning of the year, whether it be Trump's tariffs, whether it be, these taxes that are coming in Indonesia. And we are all put in a survival mindset. And that survival mindset works well for them, right? Keeps us emotional. And I just am of the hope that whoever you are, whatever race you are, that coming together is a possibility. Coming together is something hopefully I can bring to your attention. And I don't want it to be because if it's an airy fairy idea, it would be great, for us to have tolerance for each other, kumbaya. No. If you have an issue with thinking things kumbaya and being idealistic, that's fine because I have that issue as well. Purely from a self-interest standpoint, if you are looking to be able to provide for your family, if you are looking to be able to have a family home that you can then pass down to your children, if you are looking to have a stable job and to just live life the way you please, I think that the only solution is to come together, because at this stage, it's the basics of life that they're wanting to take away. And there's no other solution. So just from a self-interest point of view, it is the only solution. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so I hope that we can put our differences aside. That is the purpose of this channel. That's the reason why I made it. I hope that we can bridge this gap. I hope we can understand that we're all different. We all have slightly different things that we value. But at the end of the day, I'm sure we can all agree that we want the freedom to be able to do what we want and the protections that a nation is supposed to have on private property. So I'll leave it at that for today. Thank you so much if anybody's watching. And hopefully if things go well and I have something else to discuss soon, I will set up another stream. Thanks, everyone. Take care.